before we begin, why don't we have a word of prayer? Shall we pray? Father in heaven, I thank you for being able to study your creation and see how your hand works in nature and how we can cooperate instead of fight your designs. I thank you, Father, for your love, and I ask that your Holy Spirit will imbue us now that we might be able to understand some of these principles. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
George, who's the young lady I'm with you? Have I met you?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yes, I did.
Week before last.
That's right. That's what it was. I remember now. And Ernie and Mrs. Ernie, thank y'all for...
Ernie and Mrs. Ernie.
Okay.
Mrs. Ernie.
All right, we're a little bit light today from normal. We're going to cover a couple of issues in closing this series out. And one of them I want to cover is a broad fork. You know, we've talked about compaction of the soil. And compaction of the soil is the thing that we have to fight. Compaction, I have a compaction meter. If you push this meter down, it hits 300 psi. You know no plant roots, or almost no plant roots, about 97% of the plant roots, cannot penetrate 300 psi. None can penetrate 400. So, the ones that can penetrate 300 psi at that level are pine trees and cedar trees and lodgepole pines and those kind of things. Otherwise, no row crops can penetrate a 300 psi compaction zone. And that compaction zone is easy to reach. In my land, it's at 9 inches. I've set up a machine to fix that problem, but a broad fork will fix it for you too. So, now I also showed you how you can take a hose and put it on the end of a pipe, and you get this little adapter, and you drill holes in your land, and then you fill it up with this biology from the woods, and then water it all in. It'll start eating, the microbes will start eating that compaction layer. For the broad fork, every single time you plant your garden, when you get through and you pull up your plants, you should go through with a broad fork. And a broad fork will loosen the soil, and then you should water in some micro tea, the extract, which we covered last week. You should water that in and add some more to it. And so the broad fork, I'm going to show you the broad fork.
Hi, I'm Dave Epstein. This is Growing Wisdom. I'm watching Anthony Stevenson here at Johnny Selected Seeds using a broad fork to aerate the soil. And Anthony, as you're getting closer to me, tell me a little bit about this great tool.
This particular model that I'm using right now is our standard 520 model, named for its 5 tines to the 20-inch wide base. We have a 415 broad fork, which has 4 tines over a 15-inch base, and a 727 and a 7 over a 27-inch base.
Well, tell me about how it was developed and what it's best used for.
The broad forks were of European design, and they were redeveloped by Elliott Coleman for strength and ease of use.
And what do you use them for?
Loosening and aerating soil.
Why not just go get a rototiller? Why use this?
The advantage of the broad fork is that it's used to aerate soil without damaging the soil structure. The ecology of the soil stays intact, and the microorganisms are not disturbed.
So what about all those weed seeds that are stuck underneath there?
They're still stuck down there. With the rotozoa, they'd be thrown up over here.
That's a huge advantage, because one of the mistakes I've made in the past is turning too much soil over and bringing the seeds up and really replanting them.
Right.
By using this, I'm not replanting weed seeds.
Yes, it limits that.
So Anthony, only 3 sizes?
There are 3 sizes for aerating soil. We do have a 4th size that's used to harvest root vegetables.
And I bet we get to see that.
We do.
All right, let's go.
So Dave, this is the 920.
9 times 20 inches.
That's right. This is used for harvesting root crops. We'll be doing potatoes right now.
And how does it work?
Basically, the action is the same as the broad fork that I was just showing you. You plunge the tines in, pull back. But this time, when you get the potatoes out of the ground, you shift the fork back and forth a little bit. The soil falls through, leaving you your potatoes on top.
Hey, look at all those potatoes coming up. That's pretty neat.
Dave, this is easier and faster to harvest root vegetables than a traditional fork. It works great for carrots, too.
Anthony, a great set of broad forks, and we could practice on the other ones as well. How hard are these to use?
Not at all. You want to race it?
Race? All right, I'm going to grab one.
Dave, before we start, let me at least explain how to use it. Tines are plunged into the soil using your own body weight. When you rock it back about a 30-degree angle until you see the soil start to break, you pull it back toward yourself about 6 to 8 inches, step on it again, and repeat.
Seems easy enough.
Very easy.
I think I got it. Ready, set, go.
It's actually really easy to use, and it keeps your soil roots receiving air.
Johnny's broad fork, a great tool for any gardener. Aerates the soil, keeps the soil structure, things are going to be growing pretty good here. Let's go, Anthony. You got to catch up. Come back every week for all of our tips and help here at Growing Wisdom.
If your soil is really compacted, this works really well. But I use another tool in my greenhouse, and because I use compost as a growing media, it's really soft. And I'll show you, a friend of mine's doing this in my greenhouse. It's just a big pitchfork. And all you're doing is pushing it down and just rock it. That's all you have to do. So, it's really simple. The issue is, if the roots cannot get air, they die. If the microbes can't get air, they die. So you have to make sure air is reaching the root zone. And that's a perfect way to do it. Now, we cut down our trees in January. Last week of January, we cut down our pine trees. And Nan flipped this over, my wife, for those of you who don't know, flipped this over, and you see the mycorrhizal fungi already eating that log. That's from January. You see the mycorrhizal fungi all through this. You see the fungi, the fungal strands all through here. That's already decomposing that plant matter. So if you use a rototiller, what does it do? Kills it dead. And you don't want to do that. You want to keep the horizons exactly the way they're supposed to be. Now, Nan and I were hiking in the forest last week. I just want you to see this. That is a moth. Does that look like a moth? That's a moth. Is God amazing? He makes these beautiful creatures, and unless he had fluttered his wings, Nan would have never seen him. It's just amazing. This is mushrooms, and mushrooms are mycorrhizal fungi. They're there to break down the cellulose of the trees. Now, this is something I wanted to mention at this time. You know, we have, in our farm soils, we're bacterially dominated, and the bacteria breaks down the simple carbohydrates, the simple cellulose. Fungi breaks down the more complex, like tree limbs and stuff. And there's a study I listened to one of my classes last week, and she went over this study where they took a log that was full of fungal spores, and they put it in a predominantly agricultural area, and from that point, the fungal spores all died, and the tree did not decay. Even 10 years later, it was still there. So the key is bacteria cannot break down trees. It must be fungal spores that attack the tree, start breaking it down, turn it into humus, and then feed the other trees. You can take the cellulose from corn and all of that stuff that the bacteria break down. You can take that and put it in the forest soil, and because the forest soil does not have, the deep woods forest soil doesn't have bacteria, it also will not break down. So what you have to do is create a combination in your fields of bacteria and fungi and have a complete food web there. And we've been covering this week after week, how you balance that out. You want a 50-50 biomass of fungal and 50-50 biomass with bacteria. All right, now, something I covered a few weeks ago was the fact that we have mycorrhizal fungi that attach to the roots. We have endo and ecto. Endo goes in, invaginates into the root system, and ecto wraps around the root system, just wraps around, and the trees and the plants feed it, exudates, and in exchange, those fungus, that fungus spore, will go out in search of food for the tree and feed it. It's a truly symbiotic relationship. They also, this mother tree will allow this baby tree to live, but if something else grows up that it doesn't like, it will kill it. It will send a signal to the fungus to kill it with a parasitic fungi. So that brings us to the next section. It's called companion planting. There's some plants and some trees that will live together, and some plants and trees that will not tolerate each other. And what you have to do is just make sure you don't plant the intolerant species together. If you took two very dominant people and put them in a relationship of marriage, what do you think you're going to get? Very big sparks. It's the same thing happens in a forest. What you want to do is companion plant. That is not a companion to this, so it sends out a signal to the fungus. I will not give you any more exudates unless you kill that plant. And so he goes out there and he kills that plant. And that's why when you go through, if you go through a forest, you've got hickory, oaks, and cherry trees all together, and that pine tree looks like it's dying. Well, it is. They're sending out a signal to kill it. They don't want it there. And you go into a huge pine forest, it's pines, pines, pines. Even if they're natural pines, you see nothing but pines, but they love palmettos. You understand? Because they are grouped together as companion plants. Don't fight nature. What you have to do is understand these companion species. All right? So, I'm going to show you a little video, and I think I may have shown it to you, but I really think you need to see this again to understand the
My
mother.
research does show that they're communicating. Yes, it's a method of communication.
It's talking about mycorrhizal fungi in the forest and trees.
These plants are really not individuals in the sense that Darwin thought they were individuals competing for survival of the fittest. In fact, they're interacting with each other, trying to help each other survive. Well, I'm a forester, specialized into looking at below-ground communities. We found that these fungi actually will connect one plant to another plant. Okay, so this tree here has got roots growing out everywhere, and as we get further away from the tree, we're more likely to find its roots, the ones that are involved in this trade. This is where the fungi hunt or scavenge for nutrients. So the tree sends down its carbon, it goes through the root system and through into these fungi, and there's an interface between the root cortical cells and the fungal cell that's wrapped itself around that cortical cell, and that's where this exchange goes on. So meters away, you can have a plant connected to another plant, and they're just shuffling carbon and nitrogen back and forth according to who needs it. The mother trees we think of as the big old trees. They catch your eye when you walk into a forest. This Douglas fir is about 500 years old. It's a massive tree that will have an enormous network associated with it. So you can think of this as a mother tree. You know, it's in the sense that it's a dominant tree in the forest. It's probably networked into all of the trees all around it, even though there are different species. So this tree is probably linked over to trees as far as you can see. It's just that there are trees in between that are the bridges for the network. Forest ecosystems are really complex systems, just like the Earth is a complex system, the biosphere. And the way it works is that we have all these parts, and all these parts are working together, like the fungus is working together with the tree. It's a lot like how our brains work. In neural networks, our brains are comprised of neurons and axons, and these neurons are physically related, but they're also almost metaphysically related because they're sending messages back and forth and they're building upon each other. It works a lot like a forest ecosystem. So in this forest, the fungus and the tree working together allows lots of structure. That structure is expressed in species diversity or structural diversity of the forest. And that diversity is really what gives the forest resilience. The resilience to withstand unexpected events like a fire that might come through, or an insect, or a windstorm. Well, somebody's going to be left standing because there's a diversity there.
That's enough for that. The issue is that you have a dominant species in every forest. You have a dominant species in your gardens. You have a dominant species everywhere you go, and you work with that dominant species, or you have to remove that dominant species. If you have a series of a hedgerow of large oaks, and you're trying to plant your garden underneath it, it's not going to work. That tree is going to kill your garden. So you have to either decide to plant in a new location or take that tree out. You cannot work at cross species. I'm going to show you today intercropping, companion planting, and beneficial insects. These are not the same, okay? Now, how you work with beneficial insects so you do not have to use pesticides anymore. Intercropping, companion planting, and beneficial insects. Now, here's a chart. What I'd like for you to do, Alex, if you could get some help. So I want you to...
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In the general area where I live, there's a lot of trees, a lot of greenery. But there's one particular tree, the species, no matter where it is, it seems to be dying. Is that the case among trees?
Yes, yes. Actually, they're killing.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they're
it's-
full
it's-
grown, but I guess they won't let them grow anymore.
They're transitioning into a new succession. I don't know if you were here whenever we went through the successional ages where somebody clears their field, they've taken out their trees, and then they have nothing but weeds, okay? And then it changes and goes from grasses to part perennials, and then to whole perennials, and then it goes into a pine forest, and then it ages. The pine forest begins to age and goes into oaks and hickories, and those hickories and oaks eventually kill out the pines, and then they grow up, and then the other species grow up among them, and then they eventually kill those out. It's a process of succession, and it's determined by the age of the forest. That age of the forest, as it ages, it takes and starts killing species in that forest.
So that's what's happening to, no matter where I see these particular trees in this area, they're all dying. They all got brown leaves and they're all just decaying.
It could be. Now, what happens is you'll see in nature a plant becomes weakened, and it may be because they sent out a fungal parasite to those trees, and they weaken. Then the bugs attack it. Now, what we have to understand is the reason the bugs attack it is the tree is sending out a distress signal, and that's an ultraviolet light. And it's saying, come and just take me out and break me down into cellulose and feed me to the forest. If you have bugs in your garden, it's not an indication that you got bad bugs. It's an indication that you have weak plants. Okay? Don't let the chicken and the egg fool you. You must understand first that disease sets in because of a weak tree. The bugs attack that tree. Okay? All right? So I want you to see this companion plant table. I printed this up for you so that you can kind of be aware of it when you start planting your food. Let's go down to the bush beans. The bush beans like to be planted with beets, carrots, cabbage, cauliflower, cucumbers, marigolds, chard, corn, and then celery, eggplant, leeks, all of those. It likes to be planted next to those. If you plant, say, the beets next to the brassicas, it's going to do very well. Both species will do very well. But if you take and plant your beets and plant it next to a pole bean or mustard, both of them are going to die or be weak. Do you see the chart, how it works? Okay, now there's a reason for this. There's several reasons for this. The exudates that the plant put out in the root system that draw bacteria and fungi are diametrically opposite to the bad guys. And so what happens is they fight each other constantly in the ground. They attack each other. The fungal species of each one start fighting each other underground, and then it weakens the plants. So what you want to do is understand that there's dominant species in your gardens, there's dominant species in trees and forests. And you work with those dominant species, you work with them, and you plant the other plants someplace else. Don't plant them near them. Okay? So work with nature, and that's the deal. Now, let's go down to the herb planting chart. Okay? Now, the herb planting chart is really something very important to understand. Let's go to the mint. It says, companion to cabbage, tomatoes, improves health and flavor, deters white cabbage moth. So when you use these mints, what you're going to do, look at rosemary, okay? It's a companion to cabbage, beans, carrots, and sage, deters cabbage moth, bean beetles, and carrot flies. So what you want to do is understand that you want to companion plant these herbs with the vegetables. You don't want to monoculture your garden. If you monoculture your garden, disease sets in, you don't benefit either one of them. What your monoculture is when you plant one thing of everything in the entire field. Then you have to spray it all the time. You have to spray it with a pesticide, a fungicide, a herbicide. You have to constantly spray. But if you plant these companions, you won't have to do that. You will be cooperating with nature. Nature doesn't go out and just plant one thing in nature. Men do that. You go hiking in the woods, you get a little bit of this, and a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and a little bit of that. If you go out in a field that God planted, say one of these, go out to Payne's Prairie, you have all kinds of different diversity, but they're companion planted. So as long as you know the species of companion planting, you'll do well. Now let's go to the next chart, the last one that doesn't have a title on it. The vegetables on the left side got knocked off. I'm so sorry. Let's go down to broccoli. It's easy enough to see. You'll see bush beans. Arugula is the top one you see. Then you've got bush beans. Let's go to broccoli. All right. It says friends with, and it names all the friends. And the foes, it names all the foes. But go over there and it said proceed with a nitrogen fixer. Okay, which means that you take a bean, a pea, or a fava bean, and you plant it before you plant the broccoli. Why? Because those are nitrogen fixers. They take the nitrogen out of the air and inject it into the soil. And broccoli is a very high user of nitrogen. So what you want to do is you want to plant it right as soon as you pull your beans out. If you were to plant a field of acre peas, when you go in there later and you plant broccoli, or you plant any of the brassicas, or you plant anything that requires a lot of nitrogen, mustard greens, they're going to do wonderful. You don't have to put a bit of fertilizer on, and they're going to do well. Okay? Because they're a nitrogen fixer. So this chart is for that. You may want to look it up on the internet. The cucumbers, you'll see down there in the cucumbers, eggplant on the very bottom. Okay, so let's go to eggplant. You can plant, it's a friend to all beans, peas, peppers, southern peas, and potatoes. It's a foe with corn. So you never plant eggplant and corn together, or fennel, or tomatoes together. And then it says here, you should follow it after beans or peas. Why? Because eggplant needs nitrogen. And so you see how this chart works? I think you can probably figure it out. I'm sorry to cut it off. All right, so that's companion planting. I'm going to show you some examples in all of this. All right, anybody know what this is?
Where did we get the full?
If you go on the internet, if you put companion planting chart and go to images, you'll find that. Yep. All right, does anyone know what this is? It's what? Clover. What kind of clover? It's red clover. It's crimson clover. All right, that's crimson clover. Okay, this is strawberry clover, and this is white clover. Now there's like 25 or 30 different species of clover. All clover do nitrogen fixing. They are a legume. Okay, they put out roots that are very, very deep. And I just want you to get an idea here. Now let's just go back. That's an annual. All right. That's a perennial, and that's a perennial. What's the difference between a perennial and an annual?
From year to year, they don't die.
Perennials keep coming back in.
Grow the next year.
Die off after.
The perennials come every year, and the annuals
Okay.
are finished.
You guys know. Most of you guys know. Did you know? You did. You did. Okay, so an annual dies. But they'll come back next year. How do they come back next year?
Seeds.
All right, there you go. Now the difference between a perennial and an annual is that a perennial's roots always stay in the ground and are always alive. They may die back, and you don't see the tops. Those are deciduous perennials. There's evergreen perennials. All right? The perennial ground cover, this is what I want you to understand. This is going to blow your mind. Literally blow your mind. All right? And I want you to grasp this concept, because you should always keep a living root in the ground. Now, if you had your garden I went out to Carter's garden this week, and I've got your microscopic images I meant to show you at the beginning. But if you have this beautiful garden, when you pull up your plants, what usually happens? Weeds take over, right? Yeah, weeds take over. But if you had that whole thing planted in a perennial ground cover that was less than a foot, 6 inches, 8 inches, and it covered the whole thing, it crowds out all weeds. No weeds can grow there. All right? It's a permanent cover crop. Not like this. The farmers plant this for nitrogen fixing, when they should be planting this for nitrogen fixing. It does the same process, but it stays in the ground. You don't have to keep replanting it all the time. All right? So, you plant that in your garden, it takes over. It takes over everything. It just goes and takes over, and not one weed is in your garden. It feeds your plants nitrogen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Because it's taking it out of the air and putting it in the soil, taking it out of the air, putting it in the soil, taking it out of the air, putting it in the soil, and no weeds can grow there. So how do your vegetables grow there? All right.
So what is that called again?
That's called strawberry clover. And then white clover are 2 perennials that they recommend. Now this plant gets up to a foot high, and you can mow it. Okay? So if you get ready to plant your garden, and it's growing up next to your plants, and you say, I don't want to walk through that, just mow it. Mow between your rows. Take a little hand mower, mow between the rows. That's all you have to do. All that thatch will go down. All that product will go down and fertilize your garden even more. It will also stimulate the roots of that perennial to put out more exudates to feed your plants next to it. All right? Now, I'm going to show you. This is the trickiest thing you ever heard of. In your whole life, you have never heard of this. I can guarantee you unless I told you, Ernie. Okay, so here we go. George. Okay. Now, the beauty of a perennial ground cover of clover, all right? People make grass out of it, is the roots go down 4 feet. These roots, the side roots, the lateral roots, go down 2.5 to 3 feet. But there is a center root that goes down 4 feet. Okay? Now that goes down 4 feet in the earth, and when it dies back in the spring, because it's a winter flowering plant, when it dies back in the spring, the only thing that dies is the taproot. It dies. And leaves what? A hole for water to go down into and air in the soil. You understand? You've now aerated your soil because it died back in the spring. Does this make sense to you? Okay. All right. This is the beauty of this whole thing now. Now watch where we're going with this. Here are the taproots of this. Going down 4 feet. It dies back. All these roots stay in there. And the exudates and the bacteria, the fungi, are all there, and you want to plant right in it. Completely in it. Plant your whole garden in it. Okay? Here's another taproot. This was taken out. That's 3 inches. Okay? It's a long taproot. Okay? Now, this is the nitrogen-fixing nodules. If you fertilize a lagoon, when you put it in the soil, it will not fix nitrogen. It will not make these little marbles on the roots. Okay? You cannot fertilize anything. Don't ever use fertilize again. It's working at cross purposes with God. All right? So it makes these nodules. You pull up one of these roots. This is a clover that happens to be white clover. You pull that thing out, and it has those nodules on it. You know it's taking the nitrogen out of the air, breaking it down, and turning it into ammonium in the soil, and feeding that soil ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate. All right? You plant your plants next to it. There's not a plant that won't benefit from that. They will grow so well in it, it'll shock you. All right? Here's some more nitrogen nodules. Okay. Now I want to show you these cover crops. Dr. Elaine Ingham, the one I'm taking this coursework from, she says you should take 30 species of low-growing perennial ground cover mixture, the seeds, throw it out in your field just before it rains. Let them rain in, they'll sprout up. 30 different species will give you so much diversity in exudates and bacteria and fungi, and it'll cover the entire surface of the ground. She says even mint and all kinds of herbs and anything, creeping thyme, and just throw it out in your field and let it take over. Now, and you want to do that in the fall, incidentally. Now it'll create a blanket of ground cover, like this. It's not deep, okay? It's a blanket of ground cover, all right? It's beautiful. The flowers, it brings the beneficial insects to your fields, because there are absolutely no bad insects that like flowers. Only the beneficials like flowers. You understand? So you bring your beneficials with it. Every time you plant a beautiful flower, and if you put 30 different species of different kinds of seed out there, perennial seeds, you put them out there, you're going to have every single time of the year something blooming.
At the same time, does it get rid of the other insects, the undesirable ones?
Yes, the beneficials kill the bad guys. The beneficials are saying, oh, what a beautiful field, yay! And they come and land on it. And they stay there. And they work those beautiful flowers, and each season brings a different type of beneficial insect, okay? This is some beautiful stuff, folks. This is just like mind-boggling stuff, okay, that we're going through in this classwork. All right? It's not very high. It's low stuff. You want to get the low stuff. The more low stuff, the better off you are. But the highest stuff, 12 inches, the white clover. And you need white clover in there. And you don't need a lot. If you were going to seed an entire field, an acre field of white clover, you only need 5 pounds of white clover seed. You don't need a lot. All right? So here you got this ground cover. It's beautiful. Now people are taking this and getting rid of their lawns and putting this stuff out. No more mowing.
So you just throw it out there?
Yeah. Now think about this. If we're going to go through the time of trouble, we're not going to go buy some gas. You understand? We're not going to buy gas to put in our lawnmowers anymore. So it would be nice to have this kind of stuff around the house, don't you think? All right. So we're going to cooperate with God in this whole process. It's not deep stuff, okay? It's very, very soft, fluffy. It keeps the air in the soil. It has deep roots. All of these perennial ground covers, their roots go 36 inches minimum deep. So you need to get that soil uncompacted before you plant it, okay? And it looks like a blanket.
Is there a list someplace of all these 30?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, here we go. Is that beautiful? All right. Deciduous versus evergreen. There are deciduous ground covers. There are evergreen ground covers. The difference is the evergreen always keeps a green leaf above ground. And it sheds just like a deciduous, but it doesn't do it all at one time. It's like shedding your dog shedding, you know? It's shedding and putting on hair. It doesn't go bald. You understand? That's the evergreen, okay? The deciduous, it looks like it's dead and it's alive. Okay, so you want a combination of both. Now, there's a reason for that. As this thing dies, the deciduous plant dies back, and it looks like it's dead, and all you see is like a little stub where the roots are going down in the ground. All of that plant matter, that carbon matter, is now dropped into the soil, and the microbes are eating it. And that's food for the microbes. That's the beauty of this whole thing. It's self-perpetuating. What you want to do is not create a lot of work for yourself, but have a self-perpetuating garden. You go into an old-growth forest, God had set that thing up long ago. We don't go in there and fertilize any of those trees. He has a whole program set up, and what we're going to do is set up a whole program in our gardens. Quit fighting weeds. Quit fighting pests. Be cooperative with nature. Cooperate with God in this whole thing. All right, let's go on. How do you plant into a permanent perennial ground cover? That's the key. How do you do it? All right, I'm going to show you this. This is beautiful. You see this? That's what they're doing. All right, now this machine has little tillers on it and little planters. He goes across his field one time. He goes across his field one time, and it tills it and plants it all in one shot. He doesn't even fertilize it. Doesn't even have a fertilizer on there. So he just goes across, and that's what they call strip tilling or strip rotor tilling, okay? So it just does a little strip, and they plant right in that, and the plants come up, and these, now all the organic matter from these that just got tilled, you only till 3 inches. You know, we're used to till deep, you know, you put your tiller down, you just work it all the way across your garden, jerks your, no. You only want to take the top surface. Top 3 inches, you know, and just work your top 3 inches, okay? Now, this is a machine that I just bought, used, Okay? This machine has two little tillers on the back. It has a PTO drive. It has a little shaft here that turns. There's a transmission here. You see, this transmission turns this shaft. This shaft turns these bearings that turn these two motivators, okay? They call them motivators. It only goes 3 inches deep, and it tills just like the other one does, except it's a small one for a small farm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant this perennial mix in my fields, and then I'm going to till it with this down 3 inches. All you're doing is taking the top off. You're actually not killing the perennial root system. They will come back. Now, what you've done is just take the top off and plant right in that. Now, how would you do it? All right? You would take a rototiller like this, if you're going to do it this way. You take a rototiller like this and take the outside tines off. Okay, so take those outside tines off so you only have the 2 inners and run a thin strip. My motivator is only about 12 inches wide. I really wanted a 9 or 10 inch wide one. They're $1,000 a head, so I'm not going to buy them. So, oh yeah. So anyway, you really want 9 or 10 inches. If you take the 2 outside tines off and you run a really shallow, just 3 inches, that's all you want, put your seeds in it, that's your garden. Those perennials will grow right back around the root system of your annual and feed it.
And it'll grow through.
Yeah, oh, it'll grow through it. Yeah, it'll grow through it. I'm going to show you some of this. All right. Now, so here is a field that was a perennial field planted dry in it, just to prove that you could do it. This is a science program, okay? A science experiment. Here's a corn with companion planting. Here was a field. Here was a field that is what they call deciduous, and they planted right in it. Now those deciduous, perennial, will continue to live, and next year will grow back. As they harvest these soybeans, when they harvest these soybeans, these then will start to come to life as the winter comes on, and then they'll grow back in and fill all back in. You don't fight weeds anymore. You don't put any herbicides on anymore. You don't do any of that anymore. Don't fight nature. Work with it. All right. Here is now this is what they call it's companion planting. Intercropping. Yes, thank you, Ben. This is intercropping. Now, why would you put sunflowers in here with your beans? Why would you do that? Oh, they look pretty. Yeah, they do look pretty. There's a reason. Nan, you want to tell us the reason?
They attract the bugs, and so all the bugs come to the sunflower and not your...
Correct.
Wow.
Stink bugs. Beans stink bugs love peas, field peas. They sting them. Have you seen the stingers on them? Well, as long as you plant sunflowers out there, they go light on the sunflower and they stay right on the flower. They will go nowhere else. Okay? This is intercropping again. You see the difference. The difference between intercropping and planting in a perennial ground cover is that the ground cover stays there all year round. But they're intercropping. Now, the reason why they're intercropping corn with soybeans is that soybeans are a nitrogen fixer, and they feed the corn, and you don't have to fertilize the corn. You can do that with any bean or legume. Plant it between your corn, and it will feed your corn. You never have to fertilize again. As long as you don't fertilize the bean that you put out. Okay? All right. Now, this is a fruit orchard with the same kind of thing. They're now covering them with ground covers, perennial ground covers. This is one of the best pictures of all. Okay, here this lady has planted her garden. You'll notice she has the flowers for the beneficial insects. You see, this is intercropping, incidentally. Okay, then you've got looks like some sort of green. It looks like, and then here's some leeks. But anyway, what she has done is done her intercropping through companion planting guides. And everything is beautiful. So why turn that whole field into broccoli? Why turn it all into collards? Why turn it all into leeks? Why not do your companion planting and plant them close enough together, or your it's companion planting with Jacqueline? Intercropping. All right. Now this is a picture of a field of corn that has been planted in a permanent ground cover. All right. That's what it would look like when they got finished with it. Now what happens is they harvested it. This stuff can handle tractor tires and stuff on it, and then it will then grow back, and all the microbes will eat all of this carbon from this corn. Okay? This is the companion planting with an herb, so that it keeps the bugs away. Here is some more of these pictures. That's a permanent ground cover with corn in it, and both of them are doing quite well. That's, what do you call that? White clover. And that's young corn. So it's white clover doing nitrogen fixing to corn. That's the way you want your gardens to look. If you decide you were getting ready to pick that corn, mow the center. You don't want to walk in 1 foot high clover. Just mow the center. If you want to. If you don't want to, you wait till it's dry, go out there and pick your corn. All right. Here's some more ground cover. Here's some more ground cover with corn. See what happens to it. Now it's not getting enough sunlight, so it starts to die back. The corn is kind of shading it out, but it's a permanent ground cover that will never leave that field. Once that corn is all harvested off of it, that ground cover will grow back together, and you will never have any more weeds in your fields. All right. Here's another picture of corn taken out of a white clover field. Here's a guy mowing his permanent ground cover mix. Here's some more companion planting with soybeans and corn. And then here's a permanent ground cover in the corn. The corn, incidentally, produces 20% more than a bare field. So that's a pretty good increase. Here's a fruit orchard with hairy vetch in between it, which is a nitrogen fixer. That's actually a grape orchard. Here's some more grape orchards with different types. Here's red clover, and here's some red clover in the field. Here's grapes are just being planted with a ground cover planted with it at the same time. Yes?
And did you say that the red clover would reseed itself?
It will reseed itself, but it works against an annual crop, but it will not work against grapes. Now here's the deal. If you have red clover, if you planted red clover in between this, you have a tendency to get more compaction of the soil. Okay? And the reason why you would is because that root completely dies. If you have a permanent ground cover, they could have easily put strawberry or white clover in here. They would have always had that permanent root in the ground. They would have always had the dieback of the taproot, and they would have always had an aerated soil. They're not recommending doing this anymore. This was a transition that the agriculture industry went through. It went through herbiciding to planting annual clovers to planting perennials. That's where the industry is going now. Okay? So here they are seeding between this grape rows, and that's the same picture we saw before. Here's a fruit orchard with a perennial, and here's a fruit orchard with perennials. Here's a fruit orchard with perennials, a fruit orchard with perennials and mints in here.
Do you know the name of any of those perennials that are under the fruit orchard?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, but I'll give you a list.
Okay.
All right. So this is interesting because this blossoms when they're dormant, and then they die back when these are putting on nuts. These are nut trees. So what this farmer did was this. He said, I don't want these here when my nuts are on the ground. I want a clean ground. Well, these will die back completely below ground. The roots are going to be still in the ground. So then he goes through, right at the time his nuts fall, he takes a rake and he rakes it on the back of his tractor, rakes all the leaves and all the stuff off from underneath his trees. He lets the nuts fall, picks them up, they grow back and start all over again. It's just a beautiful process if you cooperate with God. Here is nut trees. And now this is what they used to do. And in fact, there's a lot of farmers still doing it. They're herbiciding underneath their trees. Now, there's a reason why they did this. If you were to plant, if you would allow Bahia grass to grow under a tree that is a fruiting tree, that fruiting tree will never fruit again. Did you know that? Because it takes all the nutrients out of that soil and works in the exudates work in cross purposes to it. So they said, oh, what they found was as soon as they herbicided one pass, they started dropping their nuts again the next year. And so they said, oh, let's everybody herbicide. Well, they didn't realize they started killing the microbiology in the soil, and it became dirt, and then they quit producing again. So then they started telling us to put in ground covers under the trees, and now they start fruiting again. Ground covers that are companion to the trees. Perennial, permanent ground covers. Here's an herbicidal being put on in this fruit orchard. And the industry is moving away from that because they're realizing we're destroying everything. Here's a permanent perennial under apple orchards. Now, guinea hens. Anybody ever raised guinea hens? Good. Yay. Okay. What do they eat?
Everything.
They eat, 12 of them will eat 2 pounds of bugs a day.
Wow.
12 of them.
And corn.
And corn. They like grain. So you don't want to move your grain. But they won't leave your vegetables alone. So if you have a grain field, you certainly don't. But they like to be free. They like to be free and walk around. They don't want to be tied down. If you grab them by the legs, I read an article that one guy grabbed his by the leg and he turned around and broke his arm. So they can be vicious. Just let them go. They'll protect themselves. They said don't put them in an open, don't put them in a pen. Leave one end open. Let them free range. I'm probably going to get some because I think, would I be wrong by getting them?
They're very noisy. A friend of mine just raised a whole crop of them, and she just sent me pictures, and they're out on the stone wall, and nothing has eaten them yet.
Yeah.
And they're good watchdogs.
They're good watchdogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I heard that.
A lot of ticks also.
I think I'm going to get a few. They're pretty too. Yeah. Okay, ladybugs. You can buy ladybugs from Arbico, R-B-I-C-O, on the internet, arbico-organics.com. I buy them for my greenhouse. And when they come, my greenhouse is 4,400 square feet. And I get 9,000 at a time. It costs me $46 shipped to my door for 9,000 of them. I'll open the box, and they just go everywhere. These things go everywhere. They eat every single tiny bug in that whole place. They consume them. Now, I went to this biological program, and they said, well, what happens whenever they leave? And one guy, he says, well, who raises these things, he goes, if the bugs aren't there, they're going to leave. And that's a good thing. They're finished. So, that's a good thing. So if you put them out in the field, just let them go. They're cheap. 9,000 can do 5 acres. But I put them densely in the greenhouse. They make babies, incidentally. They come in such massive amounts. They're eating, that's one eating an aphid, you see. Here's another one eating an aphid. You know what they're doing. So they even do that in front of you. They have no shame. So they lay their eggs on your plants. You'll see those eggs. You'll see them on your tomato plants and on the leaves of your cucumbers and peppers. And you'll see those things. Oh, good. And then they hatch and they become these things. Those are ugly, aren't they? Yeah. Nan said, "Oh no, bad. No. That's a good guy." And he eats aphids too. He's eating aphids. So they eat aphids in the larva stage, they eat aphids in the adult stage, and they make tons of babies. It's a wonderful thing. All right, here's some ground cover under fruit orchard. Ground cover under regular trees don't ever let grass, this is what the scientists I'm taking this biology course from, don't let grass grow under a tree. It's not natural. She says leaves are supposed to fall, they're supposed to decay, the microbiology is supposed to grow. If you let grass go there, you're going to fertilize it, and when you fertilize it, you're going to kill the roots of the tree, and people wonder why they're killing their beautiful trees. Grow a perennial ground cover under your trees, she said. They will be a benefit to each other.
Chuck,
Yes?
how will you remove the grass
She says that, that you should take plastic and lay across it and cover all the ends and let it cook the grass. Take it off 4 weeks later, then plant your perennials in.
You can use those big blue tarps too, they sell at,
I've never used that, but I've used clear plastic and I've used black plastic, and all of them get to 140 degrees and all seeds will die at 131. So,
the tarps you can reuse.
yeah, you could reuse the tarps, but I'm not sure that they work. Yes?
The problem with the top is it breathes.
Probably some don't, but yeah, you know what? She says use black plastic or clear plastic, both work exactly the same. Put it on your soil, let it cook 4 to 6 weeks, and it will cook all the weeds and pathogens, and all the grass will die. And incidentally, I'm glad I thought of this, Carter, if you have puddles of water, the grass under the puddles of water will not die. So, you see that puddle, go out with a broom, sweep it off. Okay? Because it's an insulator that keeps the grass from getting hot. And you go out there and you look at that puddle of water and look under that puddle of water, it's green grass. I meant to tell you that the other day and that slipped my mind. Okay, so perennials under trees make both grow well. And you don't have to fertilize anymore, you don't have to mow anymore. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Anybody know what time it is? I'm afraid I'm running the clock. Okay, yeah, we're getting close. Okay, here's a perennial mix between the plants, perennial. You see how much is done today? I just want you to see, kind of reiterate this thing. When you put a perennial ground cover all next to your fruiting trees, all next to everything, you put perennial in it, everything flourishes. Use the perennial ground covers to your best advantage. They're beautiful. They even keep erosion down. They get the low growing type. And this is a clover. This is a clover yard. Yes.
I just wanted to ask you about a fungus that helps all plants to make nitrogen. Isn't there?
Yeah, we covered that in one of the previous classes. I don't remember the name of it, but you know, everybody knows that legumes, if you take rhizobium bacteria and attach it to the legume seed, and then you put that legume seed in the ground, it will do the nitrogen fixing for you. Well, all plants do nitrogen fixing for you. All plants do, if you have the right bacteria. And you can buy that bacteria. It's called azobacter. Azobacter. It just came to my mind. Azobacter is a bacteria that you take a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons of it, put it in a gallon jug, shake it up, take your seeds, put it in a bowl, pour it on your bowl, wait 15 minutes, then take a strainer, pour them in the strainer, put them out in a valley towel on your thing, and let them dry for 4 or 5 hours. When you plant those, they will nitrogen fix. Every single plant will nitrogen fix from that point on. You will never have to put any nitrogen fertilizer on the rest of your life.
But you can also just shake it up and put it on the soil too after the seeds are planted, right?
You can, it isn't as effective. It has to contact the seed. If it doesn't contact the seed, it will not germinate. Okay? So, here's a beautiful one. Now, you can go to onlineplantguide.com. The list. I'm telling you. Onlineplantguide.com. And you put in there, I'm in zone 8. That's where we are. I'm in zone 8. I want a perennial, ground cover, less than 12 inches. Click, click, click. It'll give the whole list. All right? Then you put that botanical name in, because there are a lot of common names that are different. Put that botanical name in a Google search, and you'll find seed. And mix this seed with that seed and put it out all at one time. All right? That's where you get it. Okay, now, so if you want to get earthworms, you go to, I want to show you about earthworms. Okay, earthworms are easy, you don't have to dig them. This is not a really well done video, but I want you to see how it works. If you take mustard, you know mustard, like they make mustard powder, you can buy it at Ward's in Gainesville, you can buy it online. You take a quarter of a cup and a gallon of water, and you mix it up, and you pour it on where, if you think you got earthworms there, you pour it on, earthworms are going to come right up. All right, I want you to see what I did. So if you want to get earthworms, you go to a place that is pretty obviously earthworm territory. When you see an armadillo dig holes, they're looking for earthworms. They eat them. So here's the grass area that I suspect are earthworms. There's plenty of earthworms. I made this concoction of mustard and water. And we're going to pour it on here and find out if they come up. So basically, you just pour this concoction on the soil. Now watch how quick it comes up. Earthworms down there. They will just come to the surface, like this one. See? See how quick it comes up? So you don't have to go out and dig, just pour it on the soil, and they'll just come right up to the surface. The mustard. Mustard, they don't like mustard. It'd be like you, if you didn't like hot peppers, you eat some hot peppers. That's what they do. I hate this stuff. Oh, get out of the ground. Put them in your bucket. So if you want to collect your earthworms, that's the way to do it. Future schedule. This is the last gardening class. It's dry powdered mustard. It's an herb. Okay, so future schedule. There are some gardening classes coming in the future that I want to cover what we call permaculture, which means putting in a permanent garden where you never plant a tomato plant again, where you never plant a pepper plant again, never plant a cucumber. It will come up year after year. We're going to cover that in the future. But next week, Sharon Conlon, Sharon, would you raise your hand? Sharon Conlon's head nurse of surgery at VA. She's going to cover GMOs, the biology of the human health next week, and how all this ties together to create a good human. Why should you grow plants without fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides? Why should you be eating like that? She's going to cover that next week. All right? So the pastor, we're going to start the week after next, a week from next Sabbath. He's going to start a Bible study on last day events here from 9:30 to 10:30, just like we've been doing. And I'll be in China, Taiwan, and Japan. So for those 2 following weeks, I'll be gone. So he's going to cover that, start that class then. And then, August, put this on your calendar, guys. This is important now. August 2nd, 9th, and 16th on Sunday evening, we're going to have solar classes. How to build solar, put them together to make one freezer work. It's not very expensive. Or to make 2 freezers work, or how many freezers you want, so you can just have the sunshine, provide electricity for your refrigerator, for your freezer, so when they shut your electricity off, you're going to have electricity. Just enough to get by. You won't have to spend a lot of money. It's going to surprise you how cheap it is. He's also going to cover on those 3 lessons, he's going to cover how to get water out of the ground with sunlight. So you don't have to buy a hand pump to pump your water. Okay? So that's what he's going to cover. It's going to be at 6 p.m. He's driving from Gainesville each one of those weeks. He's doing this for me as a favor to teach you guys. He is an expert on solar, setting up solar. All right? Then we're going to have on 2 Sunday afternoons after that, August 23rd and 30th, we're going to have gardening classes. Donna Price is going to head it up. Pat Mitchell's going to help her. 2 Sunday afternoons. We're going to teach you on the first Sunday afternoon, we're going to teach you how to do water bath canning and how to do freezing. And then we're going to teach you how to, the second week, how to do high pressure canning for different types of vegetables and dehydrating foods. So that you can be like the 1800s and you're going to put these things on the shelf. And we're also eventually going to teach you how to do it all over a wood-burning rocket stove.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
So, all of this is very important. We're getting you ready for a time that's soon to come. And I believe it's just around the corner. Now think about this, guys. During this Revelation seminar, I showed you what the papacy is doing in the United States, right? And how it's been growing and growing in power. Do you know that everybody is kind of mad at Obama right now? So guess what they're going to vote for next time? A Republican. I mean, that's just the cycles of politics. I mean, it goes back and forth. It's just the nature of things, you know. And I'm not getting into politics. I'm just telling you this is what's going to happen. Do you know that there are 6 people running for the nomination of the Republican ticket, and 5 of them are Catholic, and 1 is Ben Carson, who's a Seventh-day Adventist? Do you think Ben Carson's going to win? Don't think so. Of the 5 Catholics, 1 Catholic's going to be president. So, and Jeb Bush if he becomes president, he has taken an oath to do whatever the Pope has said to do, he will do. He has become a Knights of Columbus guy, and you can bet your bottom dollar that this time of trouble that we've been preaching about for a lot of years is right around the corner, so you don't want to miss any one of these meetings. The pastor's going to cover it in detail on Sabbath mornings at 9:30 to 10:30. He's going to cover all of those issues in detail so that the things that you missed through the Revelation seminar, you can grab. And then we're going to cover the solar classes, how to set up a little solar panel, so all you have to do is set it out there and generate enough electricity for a freezer or a refrigerator or both, and then pump your water, and then how to do the true gardening methods of storing, canning foods. All right? Is everybody interested in this kind of stuff? Are you guys interested in learning all of this stuff?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
I am too. And invite as many friends as you can, because what we want to do is get as many people ready as possible. All right, let's have our closing prayer. Bert, would you like to have our closing prayer?
Yes. Heavenly Father, we thank you. You've given us such a beautiful Sabbath day. You've given us knowledge that we can learn how not to depend on others, not to depend on herbicides, germicides, pesticides, but to do your way of gardening. Less work, less money. We thank you, Father, that we can be exposed to this, and we just thank you for loving us and for giving us your Son to die in our place. We now ask that you would dismiss us, but as we go into the worship service, we ask that you would help us to prepare our hearts for the message this morning. We'll give you all the honor and the glory, for we ask it in Christ's name. Amen.